Rubilla?
So this is really just an administrative change. The CCS, which is like central government framework that we follow for electricity, has recently changed where it doesn't separate what we call half-hourly and non-half-hourly contracts into separate agreements. We currently do have separate half-hourly and non-half-hourly agreements to procure electricity. And this paper is just seeking authority to endorse and approve the merge of the two contracts that we currently hold into one single contract. It's going to authority because of the amount, but the amount itself is not changing. Is merely an administrative procedure to merge the two contracts, so we are now aligned with what CCS framework and central government framework does.
Any comments or questions? We agree to that.
Point from Willie.
Oh, sorry, Willie.
Yeah, Ron, I didn't have a question about the merging the contracts. I was just more interested to see what a view on when we're going to contract again for energy, because electricity prices now are on the downward slide. So is this a new contract or is this just we're in contract until a certain date? It just wasn't clear to me from the paper.
So it's not a new contract, it's our existing contract that we have to use the CCS framework for this. In terms of going out again, I have to say, I think we'll have to we could get John to come in and bring a paper on that, because I'm not sure.
Richard?
Yeah, I was just going to say pretty much the same that Rubilla said. What I would say, though, in addition to that, is that this is the government mandated CCS contract with EDF that we use. So it's subject to regular reviews with them. Away from this issue, which is emerging, the two previous separate contracts, though, there's just to mention how this contract now works is we forward buy with a kind of hedging strategy that's happening there. So actually the prices are set in advance for a fixed period of time, but then every year or so it rolls into a new deal. So we will benefit from the reduction in utilities prices as this comes through. There is an element of rigidity because we buy in chunks on a forward buy, but this will come down with the market as the market comes down.
Okay, good. Thank you. Consent to approve. Thank you very much. Contract award, student officer accommodation.
So this is looking for asking authority for approval to award a new contract for calling Helix House for student officer accommodation in London. First of all, I do have to make an apology to the authority and to members. There was actually the paper that came from BTP to BTPA with the full analysis on it, which was not included in the pack, in the financial analysis. And as a sponsor, that's on me, so I apologise, and we can provide that paper separately. But I'll go through the paper and bring some financials out, which hopefully you'll help. Currently, we have accommodation in Northwick Park. It's due to expire 31st of July 23, so in about a month's time. There's been a lot of issues with this accommodation over many years, and despite feedback to the landholder, those issues have not resolved. A lot of it is around insect infestation, cockroaches, etc., which has actually resulted in students having to be relocated to other alternative accommodation. So when it came to the contract coming to an end, BTP were keen to look for an alternative provider because despite feedback, the landlord has not improved the situation. We BTP went out to 9 different bids for competition, contacted 9 providers asking for quotes, and only 2 of those providers responded, and one of those providers was unaffordable. Of the one that did respond and was affordable, they actually put forward 3 different locations. I can go through some of the costings on those locations. So of the 3 locations, one is called Stirling Court, and it is say £6,000 per month less than the recommended option. However, they could only guarantee us a 1-year contract, and we needed a 3-year contract to align to what will be the broader training strategy, which I'll come to later. So that was the reason why that was not taken forward. And the other sites that they put forward was actually more expensive than what we're recommending with Helix House. The accommodation has to meet a number of criteria, which we've detailed in the paper. Helix House meets all those criteria. And so that's the reason why both affordability and the fact that it meets all the criteria, it was chosen above the other locations. I mentioned the training strategy. The actual training, so while the accommodation is currently Norfolk Park recommending Helix, the training itself happens in Spring House, which is based around Islington in London. But that's the lease for Spring House is due to expire in December 26th. And at that point, I believe BTP are going to have a look at the training strategy as a whole and think about where actually would be best location for a national force as BTP, and thinking about things such as value for money and affordability. This contract allows for, with notice, for us to come out of the contract in time for any decision that is made when the training strategy is taken as a whole in 26, when Spring House lease comes up as well. In terms of how much it is more than the current offering at Norfolk Park, for this year, 23-24, the budget shortfall is a total of £216,000. There will be a COG have agreed a tolerated overspend of 166k, and the remaining 50k is going to be managed within the people and culture budget. And then from 24-25 onwards, that pressure will be included in the MTFP, as you would expect. So what we're asking from authorities today is to approve the total spend of 3.1 million, including VAT, for the 3-year contract, and approve BTPA to enter a contract with London Nest for the accommodation at Helix.
Thanks, Rubina. Before I open up, do you want to say anything about the accommodation?
Yeah.
Dislike the present state?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, from a values and leadership perspective, a sort of EDI perspective, I mean, it couldn't be. I mean, I think my student accommodation way back in the day was better than what we're asking our people to stay in. I suppose a couple of things I would add to it. So I prefer the location of the new one. I think being co-located in quite a vibrant part of North London, which is very diverse, it's reflective of, you know, the environment where we're asking people to police. I think that adds an advantage. The other one is just purpose-built, sort of, you know, medical accommodation, which is grubby. I think, Claire, you and the team have had to oversee lots of sort of remedial action. I did turn up there unannounced and went into some of the rooms. For me, there was something of a security issue, that, you know, how quickly and happy they were to just give me the keys to the room. You know, certainly I was very uncomfortable about that. And I think this contract gives us the flexibility to have something better for our people. We talk about our people being well equipped, well led and well cared for, which is really important. But also it's of a proportionate time frame that enables us to develop the longer term strategy for training, and then we can sort of tweak around that. So we're not hindering ourselves. And also I think this will encourage more people to stay at this location. You know, nobody's going to opt in to staying at Norfolk Park in its current position. So I think there's been a lot of hard work by the force. It's not a very rich landscape for finding this sort of accommodation. And I suppose if you look at the newer generation, particularly those who are coming from university, I mean, you can see the improvement in university accommodation, which is, you know, really dealing with the demand and the expectations of the student population. And I think, you know, we should be no different. I can confidently say none of you would want to stay in our current accommodation. And I think, you know, from a leadership perspective, you know, I'm, you know, keen that we move to this as quick as possible.
Thank you very much. Any points or questions from colleagues, Bev?
So I wholeheartedly support this. Norfolk Park is awful, and time when you go to speak to people on their training, you know, they're full of praise about the training, and then they say the accommodation I have to stay in is awful, and I agree with that. I suppose for me, I'm pleased to hear that it's 3 years, because I think the things we need to get on with is the training strategy with the training hubs, and find a solution for those people who can't go away from their families for long periods of time, and also how we accommodate part-time officers if our training offering is away from home and however many weeks. So what this does, it does not prevent us moving quickly on those kind of things, but it actually shores up something at the moment, which is the experience of a new recruit coming into us does not live up to the genuine sort of feel-good values that we're recruiting on, and then all of a sudden we get them through the door, and it's like, well, you know, you saw the big sell, now here's reality. Yeah, so I do think it's really important.
Thank you very much, Bev. Kenna?
Noting we didn't send the accompanying paper, but I want to ask what kind of impact assessment was done around this, because this of all types of things we consider has a potential big opportunity or risk in the negative sector.
Yeah, I could just add on to that. I think one of the, from the looking at the equality impact, the new location gives a real stronger sense of safety, and I think that's one of the key areas in terms of that. So specifically female, so women working around that area, as Lucy's already alluded to, it's a lot more vibrant, it's a lot more linking to local communities, and therefore for our female officers coming into this environment, absolutely a sense of safety. The actual facilities themselves are far more supportive in terms of the working spaces, so there are space for people to work on their own or in groups there, so it gives a better feel in terms of open areas, which helps especially around wellbeing and welfare. It's got a gym on site as well, it's got commercial security, better lighting, CCTV both there and surrounding areas, Wembley. And also you've got Wembley Park Station, Wembley BTP Police Station, also very, very near. So I think they're always staffed as well, so opportunity for people to engage in those areas. So I think in terms of there's no discrimination identified that needs to be mitigated within that. If anything adds to it, it's a sense of it's been built specifically. It's a new refurbishment for us. So we have given them ideas around how we want that to look. It's quite an important part. I think if I can just add, when we talk about value for money, we're looking at accommodation that costs £36 a night. You know, I think with Norfolk Park, we probably went nasty because we paid super cheap. And that's probably where we've had some of the issues that we've had. This is still incredibly cheap accommodation. And don't forget, we're not, where we've got capacity, our intention will be and is that our officers will also utilise this as an area to go first. So where we have other training, we've got capacity for training, we've got capacity here, that we also utilise in this facility. And obviously, previously, they absolutely pushed back on that. I'm a professional, we want me to work from home, and you're not going to treat, I can't have a hotel. What other organisation expects that in terms of student accommodation? So we want student accommodation, you know, obviously that can come for themselves and all those types of things, but we're expecting that from a professional service. So I think it's an absolute, got to weigh up those benefits as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or points?
I did have a follow on. And who provides assurance of that the occupancy rate is as you expect, and who provide assurance that ongoing?
So we've got central, so the Helix themselves will provide that to us, but we've got a central area within the learning and development in respect of what that occupancy is. So it's already based on between 70 and 90%. Sometimes, unfortunately, due to
when we start looking at, for example, part-time officers at the moment, if they choose to, and they come into the Helix, we are going to have, we are going to have some concerns around over occupancy, because obviously if you've got double the numbers coming on course, potentially, there could be some issues around some of that. We have the opportunity to buy more room if that did become an issue. I think we're more worried about over occupancy than we are under occupancy.
Thank you.
Well, any so do support it. I listened to Beth carefully. I was worried that 3 years took pressure off Force to do something about Springhouse. So I suppose if Springhouse lease was December 26. All of the points you mentioned about training in London Web were well known, and we've been talking about them as long as I've been in the force. So I'm worried that actually to cement another 3 years of accommodation building on a standard block in London is actually not as reassuring as it might be. So I don't know what timescales for doing something about the reliance on Springhouse. Every time we go out and about, we hear from people who, I don't know, in some sense are burned by their experience, either of Springhouse or the accommodation that went alongside it. Not particularly clear. Last week I was somewhere, somebody claimed he lost his relationship by that time, was going to surrender their taser because it involved 2 or 3 days back in Springhouse and they just weren't going to do it. So there's
So we're
happening
scoping
now.
that already, so that's already started. Very
So
much.
that's been happening for 4 years.
Yeah.
Scoping.
Okay, well, we can bring that back to perhaps the P&C committee in respect of where we are with that and the next stages around that, because actually choosing where the hubs will be is where we've got to at the moment. Because the intention, obviously, is to do that in hubs.
So we've had the training pods. I don't think you've seen those. So they're out. There's 5 of those that are out at the
What is
moment.
it? I don't know what it is.
We've not looked at the photo.
It looks like
So it's like a TARDIS, it's a phone box. So there's 2 aspects to it. One is that the trainer can sit in the one at Springhouse and deliver training remotely to everybody, so that the trainer is actually in a soundproof environment, so it's delivered in a more professional way with air conditioning and lighting. The other is for those people that are accessing perhaps some of the stuff that we're rolling out about sort of command training at the moment, so you don't have to travel, but you're not sitting in a office environment where you're trying to do quite an intense course. So I think, we are making progress, but, the intensity of this is richer after COVID because people's expectations around travel is demonstrably different to when it was before COVID. But some of the things that, we know we've got underutilisation of the Liverpool estate. During COVID, there was the delivery of one of the courses in Liverpool. I think the force went back very quickly towards the Springhouse model. So there's lots of moving parts. I think what I would like to assure the authority, we want to do this once well. So it's not, I recognise, Hugh, that it has taken quite some time, but I think the reality is we've got Chris Walton in the role. We're setting some very clear objectives about what we want to deliver. Some of those things have been delivered so far. There is a reality. Some of it, they have got to go to a central location. We haven't got a huge excess of money in the training budget to deliver regional-based training centres. So we've got to find a hybrid in terms of how to deliver that. Sergeant's course is going to be another example where we're not thrusting everybody to a central location. So the strategy obviously was approved recently in terms of the training strategy. And then what goes alongside that is then how geographically are we going to deliver this? And, I think we're really ambitious, but I think it's not a quick process. I think it's helpful having the 2026, if you look at,
it will be over as soon as we know. It's just, it's just to blow pressure. I gave it, Ron, am I going to regret this comment? There's £600,000 of unspent apprenticeship levy every year. Could be
75,000 a month.
could be invested in learning and development in some of these areas. I know there's a plan, but again, I think that comes to fruition in 2026 or 27, by which time we're expecting to spend the whole apprenticeship levy. All of that is money for learning and development that is in theory available.
The difficulty with the apprentice levy is it has to be spent on people, so you can't use it to better your offer, if that makes sense.
And we are, there's some stuff we're doing around that.
I think the challenge with that here is that's fine. At the moment, we are managing to just about keep on top of our mandatory training that we need to roll out, and certainly the step up in recruitment has required more people to come through. It is absolutely right that our current model is, you know, expecting people to come away for 18 weeks. It's not, and it is actually, some people are, you know, I mean, there's some push this in the committee as well. We have to find a better way of delivering that. We have got our first part-time course.
Yeah, that's that first part where we're just doing the first part-time recruitment because we need to make sure where those roles can be. So the process of going out with that part-time recruitment. And then the training will be ready to pick that up, as you say, using quite a bit at home as well as central together. And also as part of that is looking at how long our training course is and whether we can have it in a slightly different way. There's a lot on that area, which is one of the reasons why the committee asked for it to be, and the People and Culture Committee to ask for it to be put in as leadership training to be put into a specific area to look at as well. Yeah, to give it that spotlight.
So that's a picture of the training cloth.
Ah,
No, it's not. It's not. It's not.
It's like a photocopy.
It's a pod, but it's not the final version, which is.
Apologies, it was the best one I could find.
Yeah, Richard, not helpful.
I guess we're
Sorry.
like in the same place, but probably for the opposite lens. I'm seeing it as an opportunity to free up some time to really press on and get this stuff done. I think anyone who's attended People and Culture know how we're all passionate about this. And you know, the training strategy is in a better place. So everything is in a better place because we kept rejecting the training and development strategy because it was so amorphous and so big. Nobody could ever demonstrate the business case for it. So we're now in a better place on that. I think the other thing for me is just being pragmatic, is we have some cost. You know, if we've got a Spring House lease until 2026, we've got, you know, and we've got Northwick Park, which is full. I've presided over better prisons, I have to say, better quality prisons in my past. So, you know, something really has to be done about that.
can I just add to that?
And can we just press on, please?
Which if I could just add on to the impact that will have from a recruitment perspective, going out and seeing what you're going to come into, I think can't be undone from a values perspective.
Yeah.
And also how that pushes out to our current staff, because officers, you know, they don't want to come in, they don't want to come in and do the training, you know, they're also do mandatory training, you know, don't want to have to stay there. And I think that experience, user experience, I don't think, you know, yeah, right, it's not a quantifiable cost, but you can't underline how important that is in terms of retention over.
Okay, any final points? I'm conscious of time and we're falling a little bit behind. Are we content to approve this contract for a value of 3.1 million? Thank you very much. So approved. You, Chief Executive's report.
Thank you. Well, I'll say take it as read. I'm not going to go through it all. That's what I mean by that. I have 4 things I was going to draw colleagues' attention to today on my report, which is really a tour of the horizon of all the things on my mind, which I hope is of value. But the 4 I was going to bring out is paragraph 1.2, because I think it's kind of clear it's approximate, just the in-year financial pressures that BTP is facing this year. Are exercising my mind. I know Lucy's mind, Ron's mind. So you may remember from, I think it was the March meeting, we knew we entered the year with 9.5 million pressure. That hasn't gone away, but it's still quite early in the financial year. So we are focused on the Q1 forecast, which I think should be out in the next week or 2, Richard and Ravila, and really to, well, who knows what decisions that might predicate, but first thing is, real pressures in this financial year, just in case you think this is all a long way off. Second thing, and a much smaller point of detail, is that I've misled you on paragraph 3.2. I realised when I said that all 3 HMIC FRS reports that I've published, actually the serious organised crime one is published. I think they will be soon when they understand, but just so you know, the serious organised crime one is published. The third thing I was going to say, okay, the trivial to the fundamental is paragraph 3.5. The executive team, I dare say that one may have something to say later about the fact that this actually is Stephanie's last day with BTPA. It is actually Rubena's last full authority meeting, even though she's going to be with us till 15th of September, so that looks like a long way off. She doesn't get to have another full authority meeting. And Sam, fortunately, will have another full authority meeting, which is a relief, frankly, but also Sam is going to depart at the end of September. So the reason I mentioned that is I know I put in a note, but it's quite a big change for the executive team. Just leave it there. And well, the last thing, the fourth thing, paragraph 4.1. We kind of, I didn't draw attention to it in an earlier item because I didn't. But in the board effectiveness evaluation paper, you saw at the back there was a one-page assessment of how we're doing against our goals. 6 goals of the authority set for itself. Actually, we graded ourselves red on 3 out of those 6, which in a different room at some point in the coming weeks we might want to have a proper conversation about. One of them is policing and security, and so I'm kind of flagging to you here. It's a conversation we had with TfL recently, wasn't it? That I'm 100% not decrying in any way whatsoever the successful pilots and ISPP, Alan, and the 5 stations. But what I am saying is our ambition that we talked about 18 months ago, more about full integration of police and security across the whole network to coincide at that time with the introduction of GBR, isn't progressing to my mind fast enough. So the one thing I can do is put a red marker on that and try and provoke debate. Again, I don't really think that's for today, Ron, but I'm drawing attention as something that I would want us to speak about in a few weeks. So those are 4 things. In your financial pressures, serious organised crime HMRC is published, a big churn in the senior levels of the executive team, and I'm grading as red expression of the security goal at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Any questions or points from the chief executive, please? Nick?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's for the chief executive or the chief constable, really, but the one you didn't mention, is the pay award.
Oh, yes.
Which obviously we discussed in People and Culture Committee and the pressures that could hit the budget. But, if you can believe anything you read in the papers, the suggestion is that the public sector pay review bodies recommendations are going to be higher than the Prime Minister's prepared to stomach. And I just wonder how you see that playing out, not just for the police service, but for all executive.
Politically or financially?
Well, I'm not interested in the politics because we've got one politician in the room and I don't want to become the second. But how that's going to play out in terms of our budgets, in terms of impact on the force, morale, all sorts of things. Because last year it was, you can't have inflation busting pay rises because the public sector pay review bodies report and you get what they give you. And this year it looks like it's going to be, well, they're giving you too much, you can't have it.
So Lucy might want to say something. For me, you're quite right. I definitely meant to mention it as part of the in-year pay pressures. It'll either make them, well, it's not going to make them much better, might make it a bit worse. Actually, I think we say like each 1% above what we budgeted for is about an extra 1 million this year. So in the scheme of things, it's as bad as the pressures we're already facing. More to the point would be, the morale issues, which Lisa might want to talk about. One of the bits of research that I meant to do this weekend, but I haven't done, was some of the reporting I read was it's very unusual for the government not to agree with a pay review body. They've only done it 4 times in the last 10 years. And I thought that those 2 things are mutually exclusive. And I wondered if, like, each year we have 10 pay review bodies, that's 4. Anyway, then if everyone knows the answer to that, how unusual is it? I remember it not happening, I think, once recently. Anyway, but your point maybe is for Lucy or Alistair about morale.
So, obviously there's a lot of debate about it in the public. I'm not going to keep that. So if you look at policing, I think the submission from Chief Constable's Council was that policing is about 17%, against where it should be if you take inflation. So obviously that's felt by everybody within policing. I suppose the interesting point for us is obviously the MTFP has a 4% in it, and then the following years 3%, the following years 2%. So 2% is looking to be quite unlikely. So I think we've got some significant choices that the authority will need to make. To the legislation is very clear. We've got to be an effective force and to have we've got to be funded appropriately to be able to deliver that. I think it's important for us that while we do the comparable and think about what it means from a policing perspective, obviously our people keenly look at what's happening within the rail sector, and the rail sector has had much more favourable settlements than policing has had historically, and is likely to potentially have in the future. And I think that's the hard fact for us is for some of our people, it's they can increase their salary significantly by resigning and joining the rail sector. Now, we're not seeing a huge amount of that at the moment, but I think in terms of morale and people voting with their feet, that's something that we have to have an eye on. Obviously, the settlement is being discussed. Potentially, there are also agreements that being 7%, so that's size significantly above what we budgeted for the settlement that you gave us. It's not far off what we predicted, even though we settled in a different space. The authority chose to settle in a different space. It's not far off what we were asking for in the pay proposals when we were up in Birmingham. So I think, at the end of the day, there is no budget to deal with anything above 4%. It's not consumable within the force. If I come back to Hugh's point, because naturally, Hugh, I was drawn to paragraph 1.2, which you wanted to reference as well. But, the 9.5 million, if you just look at the strategic challenge that we've got, we took around about just over 4 million of that is a over-programming that we accepted as a force. The rest of it was, is an unbudgeted cost pressure, which at the meeting in Birmingham, we were expecting to come from reserves. So again, we've got no budget cover for that, and we certainly won't be able to manage that residual pressure within the force. So they are some of the challenges, I think, as we go forward that we face. So we could, in effect, be having another full year £8 million increase on the already 9.5 million. So we'll have a lot of budgetary pressures, which we've got no coverage for that at the moment. And the only one that we have, certainly accepted is that we would be dealing with the over-programming that Alistair manages as a result of the sort of just the way the force operates. So, I suppose I can't overemphasise the challenge that we've got at the moment as a force. It's a conversation that Ron and Hugh and I have had, and I think your point is right, that obviously the coverage from the Prime Minister's position, but at the end of the day, if it's anything above 7%, anything above 4% is a problem. The suggestion is that it's recommending 7%.
Where I think it will also be problematic for us is if they go down the NHS route and award an in-year non-consolidated lump sum to all officers and staff. That will, I think, cause us particular short-term challenges in terms of managing that sort of thing, if that is what's decided. It may not be for the armed forces and the police, but still to be prepared for whatever might happen.
I think that's really helpful. Adds even more pressure into the mix, and certainly, we don't recognise an expectation to manage the pressure beyond the over-programming, and I think, we have always mirrored the PRRB. Rachel has always given, certainly at People and Culture Committee, she has always given the historical rationale for why we're in that position. But there is a lot of stuff that is unaffordable at the moment on a large scale. I don't know, Steph, whether you want to add anything, because I know you've gone through it in the 3 days that you've been in the base.
Yeah, I think just we're reaching a point of just need some kind of clarity over the assumptions of how we're treating that kind of ever-growing list of unfunded pressures, and I think it's going to start to inform some of the decisions that we make over the summer. But having the Q1 report, we can take stock of it
hopefully we'll get some news on the PRRB. And the most important thing for me and the team is just knowing what assumptions we're making, if we are assuming that we may get cover for some of it, or if it needs to be managed in its entirety within the core budget. The longer we progress into the year, the more difficult it is to turn a very big ship around to do that. So I'd rather we get that clarity and the agreement as early as we possibly can, while keeping an eye on the horizon and the RRB and other elements.
I mean, just in terms of the figures, if it helps, so obviously if we take the 9.5 million, obviously 5.1 million of that is pressure, is non-funding pressure. The new assumptions that Richard sort of crunched through, that if we're saying it's 70%, then that's another 5 million part year pressure for this year, and that would be an 8.7 million pounds full year impact next year. So it just gives you a scale. And you know, I am very worried that the MTFP has a 3% and then a 2%. 3%, Richard? Yeah, 3%. He's not in there. 3% and 2% for the following 2 years. So we would need to revisit that as well, because that 2% is highly unlikely.
Okay, any other points or questions for Hugh? Yeah,
Just, if you don't mind, just going back to 4.1 and the integration, security and policing. I guess from my point of view, I'm slightly more optimistic around the picture than has been rated here. And I say that I think we have worked sort of collaboratively over the last 12 months more to develop through the ISPP and beyond sort of operational blueprint almost for what the future might look like at sort of front end level. And that's worked really well. In fact, I think you'd be aware that we probably haven't been able to keep up with the demand and enthusiasm from the industry to bring this closer together at pace. The bit I think we're missing here around this is twofold. Really, is the sort of next step up, which is the sort of strategic collaboration and thinking around what is the future look like as a permanent model at all levels, operational, technical, and then of course the bit around the guiding mind for this, that single guiding mind around someone to drive this, and of course also having spoken to newly appointed, I apologise for the name, GBRTT lead for this, they're cognizant of that gap as well. So I think we've done a lot of the driving collaboratively, authority and policing, sort of DFTN now, sort of steering. This is probably the bit that will assist us as we move forward. But I think the operational picture is actually quite rosy. That's probably the right way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard these reports too, and I think there's been some fantastic work done. But in a way, they would say that, wouldn't they? Because, you know, they're getting a lot of attention and they're getting a lot more involvement. What I aren't thinking about is that some of them might not be there next week or next year. And the perceived wisdom, which has been around for quite a while now, but it's really, it's been capitalism. The Treasury doesn't really trust the rail industry on costs. Now, others can disagree, so it's, oh, somebody's not. And that's a real problem for us now, when, you know, if we decide that it's a pay award there and so on, that's a kind of legitimate on cost to pass out to PSA holders, and they're going to be under enormous pressure for the reasons I've just given. So I think we are in a real pincer now. It's jolly difficult. So, you know, the realities are as the chief has described, quite right. But things like the 4.1 project, we kind of need to accelerate what might be and start not expanding on the pilots we've got now to more things that are the same, but taking some of them and saying, okay, if we had our pot again, we wanted to do it for less because there's productivity in what we've done here, as well as effectiveness. You know, what would that look like? And if we're not quite there yet, I think we need to be there to face up to things over the next few years, because that's what we're going to have to share with the industry, is they have a common issue with us.
Oliver, please.
I just thought I'd come in on that and to reinforce the points we've just heard. The top cost position at the moment is incredibly tight. You will have seen some of the stories that we've seen in the press on the potential removal of things like Wi-Fi on trains, and you might think that looks like a very small cost saving, but it's real. I was in the room at the start of the year for some of the business planning conversations, and we were sweating over hundreds and in some cases tens of thousands of pounds. We are in a slightly anomalous position at the moment where the department and the train operators are being required to manage cost, but revenue is still being managed by the Treasury. That is a strange situation that I think we all hope can be alleviated over time. But I mean, the point on Treasury and trust in rail industry costs is very well made. They expect us to get serious on this. They expect the industry to manage its costs within its means without seeking bailout. So the pressure is really severe.
And just to echo that, that is not going to improve anytime soon. So I think the sooner we understand how we manage the cost pressures, the better. So probably a deep dive on that is quite important.
I think it's across the public sector. Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Hugh, I was grateful for your qualifications. Much appreciated. I know you're a fan. In so many ways, the descriptor of integrated security policing is almost a misnomer in so many ways. It probably more aptly describes a collaborative security policing project. I think we've proved the concept, of simply making the existing resources work well together. The next stage is obviously around division of labour, really, and that's where we'll hopefully look towards costs. So it'd be helpful to join you in your thinking around next steps in terms of the true integration. So that's yet to come.
Anybody else? Any points? Any other aspects of Hugh's comments? Any points to pick up?
Well, very sad to see. Me and Lucy get
I can see them through a haze.
Andrew Beer.
Right, can we know the report, please? Thank you. Lucy.
Okay, so this is a slightly different approach to the normal one. So I will work on the basis that everybody's read the paper rather than go through it in the interest of time. Well, I'm not going to go through 17 pages. The purpose of the paper is quite specific. We've had some discussions and we had them with the authority just around discharging our requirements into the Railways and Transport Safety Act in terms of the annual report. So we felt that this felt a better, more transparent way of dealing with mine reports on BTP. So I will just draw out a few points and just go through it and then hand over really to see whether or not there is any questions. So, the performance section really is, the requirement to run an efficient and effective force. I think Alistair's reflected well where we feel we are today, and there's a lot of performance metrics that are in this report. I think it's important we always remember that 2.2 are the strategic objectives that we have agreed after consultation, and in terms of reducing people coming to harm, but particularly bullet point 2, ensuring fewer victims of the most serious crime. I think as things get tight, that's going to be really important to us. So, theft of passenger property isn't in terms of serious crime, it's not there. So in terms of where we're directing our resources aligned to our strategy, this is going to become really important as we progress forward. Wanted to just reflect on the crime prevention and safeguarding. So when we move to that category, which is bottom of page 2, you will all have heard the PDM principles being quoted through many different forums. But this is really important because obviously what we want to do is stop having crime in the first place. And it's really important that we do that in collaboration with the industry. Reflection of some really good work here, which demonstrates some of our crime prevention and safeguarding work that we've undertaken over the last year. And there's some seismic growths in there. If you look at the growth of 610, which we kept the 61016, if we look at how that has grown over the 10 years that it's been in place, that is a significant growth in demand. Alistair touched on some of the other work that we've been doing in terms of the growth around sexual offending. But a lot of work there in order to deal with more effective crime prevention, we need accurate data so we can put people in the right places at the right time and work with industry. And I know there is talk about the new charging model for industry, and we do welcome the consultation when it's appropriate for us to give a view on it, but we wouldn't want anything that disincentivises people and the rail industry not to invest in crime prevention, because otherwise we're just going to be responding to an ever increasing demand all of the time. You'll see here just some highlights I've pulled out from performance. So, 30% increase in the number of notifiable crimes. Some of that is to be expected when you're comparing it to the previous year with the growth in passenger numbers. And I think, we must remember that, if we look at the, well over 1 billion passenger journeys, your probability of being a victim of crime remains low, and particularly if we benchmark that with other international sort of comparators. Judicial outcomes, we solved, so it's always very difficult, as we know, with the maths when you start getting into the percentages, but actually, as Charlie rightly always reminds us as a chief officer group, we have actually, did actually solve more crimes. So, if you look at the increase, it is statistically significant in terms of the number of crimes that we've solved, even though actually percentage-wise, it would look as if it's not as impressive as it is. And that is against a backdrop of hard to recruit in the detective world, which we're really cognizant of. And Alan has launched the crime prevention strategy. Early stages, but I think it's fair to say, Alan, that you're gaining the interest of industry in this. We intend to use our economists around this to work out the value of effective crime prevention and what value that gives to industry as we move forward. So we were pleased to see the launch of that, and certainly something that we as a chief officer team are really passionate on. In terms of targeting our efforts, that is aligned against the strategy, as I said. So BTP we reported 12% more violence against person offences and a 36% increase in robbery. And against the cost of living crisis, some of that, sadly, if you look at the academic research, certainly in relation to robbery and theft, as money becomes tight for people, that is something that you could academically expect to see. However, both crimes did see a reduction in the number of crimes when it's classified against the per million passenger journeys. But they are crimes that have a significant impact on our victims. And as mentioned earlier, 25% increase in recorded violent crimes against women and girls, and a 99% increase in crimes involving sexual harassment, and a 2% increase in sexual offences. So that continues to be on the rise in terms of the reports that we're receiving in. I would just like to mention, I think we've had a really good Speak Up, Interrupt campaign. I think we were willing to step into an area that people can be a bit prudish about, but there's some really good work there. We've had about 4.3 million impressions from social media advertising in terms of that campaign. So I think we should be really proud of that. If you look where we were a couple of years ago, we were happy with sort of in the tens of thousands in terms of engagement, but certainly the platforms we're using, we are getting out a lot more. And we are predicting another 10% increase in 61016 as we move forward in terms of an increase further in demand. In terms of innovation and collaboration, I do think when money gets tight, innovation is the thing that you can pause. But if you want to be the best police service in the world, pausing is innovation, I think can be quite stifling. And certainly for some of the things that we're looking at, we do still want to be able to innovate either on our own or collaboratively where appropriate. So, this particularly in relation to primary delay, and you'll all be aware we've been looking at the use of drones and how we can use those in a much more effective way in terms of dealing with disruption. And obviously at the heart of everything we do is, life-saving interventions, and we can see that we have had fewer life-saving interventions some of the hard work has been, absolutely superb when you talk to the teams there. If I move on to building trust and confidence, I'm not going to repeat some of my earlier observations just around the sort of trust and confidence in policing. I think it is very fragile at the moment. BTP is slightly bucking the trend there. You'll see in paragraph 2.12. It found that 70% who contacted a police officer in the last 12 months agreed that BTP treats everyone according to their needs, and that was up from 55% in 2021. So, I mean, that's something that we are very proud of, and it's very important in the current landscape to make sure that we're super focused in that area. And obviously the Speak Up campaign, our Trust Your Gut campaign, we've seen again a statistically significant rise in people reporting inappropriate or illegal behaviour, unlawful behaviour within the force. Generating value for money. I mean, everybody always has a view on how we can demonstrate that, and there is financial savings, but there's also value that comes by using your investments in a wiser way. So our Every Penny Counts has released, it's been a good one, which is asking our workforce to identify where we can save money. And certainly we've got some savings that Richard is the good custodian of in relation to that. Just a reminder, obviously, layers and spans, and also the CT review, which is just under £2 million per annum saving. Baskerville Health is also £1 million in savings through that restructure, and obviously also our restructure of duty and events planning capability. We're still committed to the net zero carbon, and I do think the work that the team have been doing, looking at how we can recycle uniform, have better sustainable markets, reducing what's going to landfill. That's been really impressive work, and of course the work that we're doing around electric vehicles. Some big technology change, always grateful for Andy's engagement with us around technology. Particularly, I think one of the challenges this time has been body worn video, but some really great work in relation to that. Moving on to the modern inclusive force, the All People survey. I mean, personally, think that a 63% return on the All People survey is something that we should stand pretty tall about. We want to try and surpass that this year, but that was up 50% from the year before. So it wasn't just like a bit of a few extra people thinking they could do it. I would say as a team, and certainly FEB has very much used that into prioritisation and things that we needed to do in the force. Lots of changes to policy, the gender pay gap, the ethnicity pay gap, some really good conscious leadership there to think about how we can be modern and inclusive. Probably a moment also just to reflect significant events. BTP is the only force across the 3 countries that has a footprint in every big event that takes place. So just reflecting when I was, signing the report to say, we forget, we've had the funeral, we've had the coronation, we've had the Commonwealth Games, lot of really good work by everybody across the force, and with a real appetite to be better. So the new geospatial briefing application has come onto officers' mobile devices, just shows how we want to innovate and be better to get the right people in the right places. I won't go through, because I know you've had it in a couple of papers previously, but there's the infographics which show force on the move, and I think Alistair, as the custodian of work in that area, we continue to be pleased. We know it's a very ambitious programme. We are a very ambitious team, and we've got some really good people engaged in that. And the railway track just shows where we are in terms of our progress. Again, just reiterating, pleased with the audit, inspection and scrutiny. I think the GIA ones have been really productive. They've been helpful in helping us to be better. Probably more so than some of the HMI CFRS ones. They've felt a bit more sort of competitive, and whereas the GIA ones have felt like they've been working with us on how we can be better. Not least because we've got a good technology one, of course. Yeah, and I think that, again, the work from the inquiry, you know, Sean's given evidence more than anybody in policing has ever given evidence at a single inquiry. But again, the real commitment to deliver on the commitments that we have made at the inquiry, and I hope you feel as a team that you can see that we're committed to that, and that will be the 2-day training course that's coming up, where we're going to put 700 sergeants and inspectors through that process. I also want to mention Charlie's work around IPCO. You know, always a very tricky inspection. It's a very difficult part of policing, particularly in terms of our covert human intelligence sources and covert surveillance. You know, there is no room for error in that area. So we've had a good working relationship with them, and I recently, Brian Medicine asked me to speak at his away day of his people around professional standards, because they're quite keen on some of the work that we have been doing. I think probably just touch on, before I finish, just the establishment. So the one point I would make is that sometimes in the papers we all keep talking about the net establishment, but the gross is the way that this force is structured. And when you will go out and about on your visits, when people say that they haven't got enough people, that's because they are expecting the gross establishment. And obviously we are structured in a way to deliver against our gross, but we are funded against our net, and that's a nuance that can be quite tricky for people to understand. Our main shortfall at the moment are vacancies around PCSOs, and we're keen to try and drive that forward. The Police Uplift programme has hindered that because there was a quicker pathway into policing, but I think that the Casey review recommending PCSOs for stability of engagement with the public, I think we're hoping to try and continue to recruit. Then as we move on to representation, you know, it still disappoints me. We are the worst force again in the country in terms of representation of women, particularly female officers. So we have got a lot of work to do in that space. And I know that Claire and the team and us all as a pod feel very strongly about that. We've removed, some of these things that you forget we've done in the last year. We removed the job-related fitness test for all officers. That's put roughly around 65 officers back on patrol who weren't patrolling before, and some chose to retire. And then professionalism, finally, you know, in terms of risk areas for us, you know, we have got to be relentless in driving forward professionalism and standards. And I think the investment that we've done in our professional standards department, you know, other people are really looking to that to think actually this is a good step forward. And that's a tough decision when money's tight. But I think the Casey report for me made really sobering read. I think the Angeli Leone report is going to be the same. It's going to be sobering read. I think the difficulties, you read the Steed report, investigation, the review from HRC, FRS. Again, you know, they're all ones that you just sort of think, you know, what is going on. So we're in a good place. Just a reminder, we have put 5,317 people through police, PMD and PNC. So we did that and completed that some time ago. You know, some forces haven't completed that process at the moment, and we're going through the data washer. I think I'll pause there and just see if there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or points to the Chief Constable?
Just going to ask, how long do you reckon it will be for us to get through that 367 or whatever that we need to look at hard?
So Pete's anticipating that he'll get through that sort of by October, November time that'll be done. So it's certainly this side of Christmas.
Because it's a brilliant position to be in whenever, not to go out and say how wonderful we are, but a great question. I know we've got a really good position to move forward.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody else? I have to say, Lucy, I welcome this format. This format delivered more things far better, far more transparent way of voting. So thank you to you people. So anything else?
No, I suppose probably if I was to summarise it, I'd say, you know, what worries me then for this year, which I would want members and yourself as the chairman to know, is it's the timeframes for the London estate are tight. So, you know, keeping that front and centre, the unfunded pressures, Joanne onto, and I suppose the uncertainty of the pay settlement that adds to that are some of the areas. Recruitment and performance, because the two are inextricably linked. You know, fewer people does mean that the ability to deliver performance becomes harder. But I would say in terms of my confidence levels, you know, force on the move, the governance of it, actually I feel really confident of the plan. Professional standards, you know, it's not something that I feel an underinvestment in. And I do believe that our EDI work, you know, I think Karen has done a great job in terms of focusing us all on, you know, what is a controversial area, but it's a really important area in terms of building trust and confidence with the public, and also being an employer of choice. You know, it's a competitive market, and we've got some really good offers, and the work that Claire has been doing with her team to make sure our policies are fair and proportionately inclusive will inevitably make us, if you're going to choose which force to come into, some of our changes, the investment that the authorities agreed in some of the parental leave, and that makes us a better organisation to come to. So yeah, I suppose I finished by saying I'm still very proud to be the chief.
Good. Thank you. We're content to help the Chief Constable report and welcome the new format report. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lucy. Committee minutes. First of all, the performance and delivery committee. You're dealing with this case?
Yes, I do my best, Craig. So just three things to flag. We took the annual report on custody performance at the meeting in May, which I would say demonstrated really good grip on what's going on in Brewery Road. We know that that's part of the custody picture. I think it's surfaced and flushed out some good conversation around the challenges on capturing data on external arrests and use of other people's scrutiny at custody, which Alan is progressing through his custody board that's now kind of establishing itself within the force that I go to. We had a good conversation on legitimacy, specifically around disproportionality stuff of search. Some of the members will have heard that content subsequently at the breakfast briefing, but it was really clear the level of analysis of data that's going on, identification where it exists of pockets of poor practice and tackling them through appropriate supervision and stepping up efforts on that, and then the wider kind of cultural behavioural training piece that's been rolled out across all officers. It really gives the committee assurance that those issues are being taken seriously and are being progressed and tackled proactively. I think Craig would want to thank finally Vanita's team, who've made a significant amount of progress in developing a Power BI tool for members to use to interrogate performance data against the police action. The policing plan dashboard, key performance indicators. So it's not ready for wider exposure yet, but there's some final tweaks going on, and I think it will be a useful, interesting tool for members to be able to dig into data and see the trends in relation to the specific strategic objectives and the indicators that we monitor here under PDC.
Thank you. Any questions or points for Kate on that? Thank you very much. Strategy and planning, Andy?
Yeah, well, you've seen the notes, but I would just pull out the report we get now in a fairly standard format on strategy has now been approved with the deputy support to put the relevant elements of a force on the move transformation strategy against those elements of the strategy, so we know why we're doing it, what impact it's going to have on the 5-year strategy, which is a really big step forward. Sincere thanks to Alistair and the team for making that happen. Really, really good. You know, we discussed an awful lot of very relevant things. I think at the last meeting, integrated security, body-worn, serious crime, robbery in terms of the performance, crime prevention strategy, unfunded pressures, new charging model, and I'll just say that there's still some very good discussion going on that, I think, with Rafila and with Maddie, and I think what comes out of consultation will be very good. I would just congratulate them on the quality of the work that's been done and the thinking, which is really good. And of course, we've got the London estate, which suddenly discovering that the building wasn't the building we thought. You know, the things that sort of come up that delay these things that are so urgent are really a pain in the backside, but we're going to get through it. So it was a very good meeting last week we had, which is reported here, and there's really good progress on the information that comes to the committee, I think. So well done to those who support it.
Any points or questions for Annie? Right, Scottish Railways Policing Committee. I need to remark that the Scottish Railways Policing Committee, in my experience, attracts a bigger crowd than the main authority meeting. Wall-to-wall people there for reasons I can't quite work out. Nothing significant in the minutes except to just point out two things. First, Jill Murray and her team in D Division continue to work very closely and effectively with Police Scotland. The number all of how to do north of the border. And secondly, of course, we have a new Chief Constable taking up post very shortly in Police Scotland, and we don't know what her views will be in terms of these continuing arrangements. Certainly, Serene Livingston was a very strong supporter of the status quo in terms of working together between the two forces. So we'll just need to wait and see how that pans out. Does anybody have any questions or points on Scottish Railways? And if you want tickets for the next gig, you need to get your application.
Sell out role, and we won't be
One of its
standing room only.
was, it was a 4 or 6 objectives set for that committee by the Scottish Government. But one of them was transparency of oversight. So I'll take that as a win.
Yes. So they get a big crowd, that's for sure. People in culture, Bev.
Yeah, so a lot of it's been covered on the way through on the agenda and the various reports, but I just thought I'd bring to your attention, John, just to reassure you that the committee has encouraged the force to share the data between its wellbeing, health and safety team and Operation Hampshire, which is about operation of office assaults, to better understand the triangulation of that and ensure and if the assaults were increasing and whether there were any trends in respect to factors. So the analysis and the data is on the case, Ron, obviously not in time for you today, but that's been picked up, and actually there's commonality between, so both Rachel and I are on the performance committee as well, so it's covered, just to reassure you on that. We obviously discussed pay, you've heard that, and we obviously discussed allowances and ensuring that any suite of allowances should be carefully defined to do key roles, and benefits should be about, Lucy mentioned it before, attraction and retention, not just, you know, following the flow, I guess. We pressed on the police education and qualification framework, and we asked if the 2025 date could be expedited. And so a piece of work's happening on that. We then talked about the conference. You heard about the accelerated misconduct hearings, and so the requirement to provide samples for drug and alcohol testing, the committee endorsed that. Apparently at the moment, as a police officer, you can refuse a drug and alcohol test. And so contentious, but actually, if we are the upholders of the law, there should be complete transparency on that. So making sure that that is included in contracts, so people have, you know, it's very clear to people that they can't refuse it. Apply or explain, I think the phrase is. People data performance, it was good to see the increase of representation of females and ethnic minorities in recent round of promotions, but albeit more work to be done to understand, picking up Lucy's point, disproportionate decrease. There was a disproportionate decrease to ethnic minorities at the assessment phase, and I think we need to understand why that happens and whether we can better prepare people for the assessment. And we've also noted the uptick in employment tribunals post-COVID, which is not surprising. The bottleneck that was COVID and hearings. And then we looked at our work plan. And the terms of reference refresh was to ensure that the People and Culture Committee had sort of brought into the fold leadership, and I think Lucy mentioned it earlier. So it was very clear that that was a cultural thing, and having some discussion and oversight on it. That was it really, unless anyone's got any.
Thanks, Bev. Any questions or points for Bev?
I have got a point.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think it might be better picking it up in the private section.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll come back to that then. Appointments, remuneration and appraisal committee, but for me again, that last meeting, you'll all have seen the minutes of that meeting. I don't propose to elaborate very much on them now for reasons which are obvious if you read the minutes. Just to say one point that I would draw to your attention is it has been our policy for 40 odd years to stick alongside Home Office recommendations in terms of pay and other remuneration aspects, that I'm not minded to deviate from that whenever comes to hit us this year in terms of what officers and staff expect of us in terms of going forward. I don't intend to do. Any questions or points? Thank you very much. Kenna, last but by no means least.
Yeah, well, given the time of year, we had a fairly heavy lifting audit committee last week, and much of the material that you've been through today went through the audit committee last week, so I won't rehash that. Just 2 points to bring to your attention. This time of year is also the conclusion of the internal audit programme, and so there were, I think, 4 internal audit reports presented last week. Just 2 I want to mention. One was the IT resilience and technology, fixing the fundamentals, which you know we've had great concerns on in the past. It's very good to see that the GIA had given those a substantial rating. Not to say that the work is complete, but to say that work that has been done is in accordance with the plan and the governance is in place, and they have good confidence in it being successful. So that was good. And then more disappointingly on travel expenses, we've got a limited opinion. I think it was a bit of an own goal and very foreseeable. The actions have already been put in place to rectify the issues that were discovered in the audit. Effectively, we'd opened up the upstream part of the travel expense process to give people more freedom to book travel by themselves, but we haven't been putting controls in to check afterwards that people were complying with policy. So I'm sure the team's taken that on board, and I know the actions have been in place. And last point is, I mentioned briefly earlier, the annual audit opinion, which is sort of a holistic view from internal audit of the controls environment of the organisation, came in with a moderate opinion again this year. But I think some helpful suggestions of the sorts of areas we need to pay attention to in the coming year to try and up that again. And I continue to challenge to try and help move that up towards substantial, which I think almost no public body gets, but it's nothing to get from the money.
Thanks very much, Kenna. Any questions or points for Kenna? Are we content to note all these minutes with the exception of one point that okay, thank you very much. Full authority Workplan, Hugh.
I might just hand it over to Alistair. She wishes to that he was expecting me to, but it's really there for you.
So I think Hugh wanted to know that the EBSA item that's likely going to come off end of September because it's one of the purposes for the.
I've talked about my lack of comfort around EPSAs in the past, but continuing conversations with Alistair and Lucy, it's really about network rail EPSA, and we're going to have some separate discussions about that. I think it's quite possible we'll resolve that for that about the authority, but if we need to, we will. But therefore, I don't think we need to have it as a definite prospective item.
Any other points on Workplan? Consent to note at this stage, recognise they may be subject to change. Okay, thank you. That concludes the public meeting of the authority. I don't know any members of the public on Teams or anything, have we, Alistair? Oliver, of course, you're very welcome to stay for the private section if you so wish.
You will stay for the start if there's anything you'd specifically like to